I hereby welcome all of you to the occasion today. Every year, IBS-Ahmedabad organizes NGY Memorial Lecture Series to commemorate and thank the great leader and founder of the IBS Group, NGY sir. On this occasion today, I hereby take the chance of welcoming our esteemed guest on the dais. The occasion is graced here by Professor G. Raghuram, former Director, IIM Bangalore, former Professor and Dean, IIM Ahmedabad, Dr. Vivek Ranga sir, Director, IBS Ahmedabad, Jagdish Patel sir, who is the General Manager, Development at IBS Ahmedabad campus, Professor Naresh Sharma and Professor Pranav Rosalia. Sir, I will now request Dr. Vivek Ranga to welcome our esteemed guest with a sapling to mark the beginnings. To mark the beginning of this auspicious occasion, I would now request all the members at the dais to invocate Master Saraswati by lighting the lamp. Sir, please. Thank you all. An institution of higher education is a partnership among students, alumni, faculty, the administrators, donors, trustees, neighborhoods, and many more. To build a community and a culture, we all have been striving for so many number of years. We have tried to capture the spirit of our institute, our philosophy, and the journey of NJY Memorial Lecture Series through a small audiovisual. invite
Professor Raghuram, my colleagues on the dais, off the dais, colleagues from academia and industry, and my dear students. A warm welcome to all of you for the 8th ICFAI Memorial Lecture Series. It's really my privilege to be welcoming all of you at this occasion. In fact, this reminds me academic journey of a lot of my fellow colleagues, my personal behalf, where we recall Prof. Yasaswy's vision of building an academic institution. And for the same, I would thank at the outset Professor Raghuram, who graciously accepted our invitation, and an institutional builder like him would really enlighten on us on this day. When I say this, we lost our beloved founder in 2011, and I was fortunate and privileged to having an opportunity to work him from 2001 to 2011. And over this interaction, when I joined at the institute, we were a very young institute that time. We were 6 years in terms of business education. Although we started as an institution in 1984 with his vision to bring in that financial acumen in a changing scenario of industry. And let me tell you, in 1984, this was much earlier thought through before we had even liberalization and all. So he looked at, he was himself a chartered accountant, and he looked at this space of financial analyst, the state of the requirement of financial industry. That's something an institution should cater off. And we started with the CFA program. Post that, the academic institution, and today, within the 10th year of this series, we are fortunate to have more than 100 people. And Professor Raghuram, he doesn't need any introduction. Institutional builder like him to be here with us and share the vision in terms of how do we take this forward in terms of the faculty development, institutional development, and the student development. So with this, I really thank all of you for taking time today and being with us and joining this journey of taking this vision forward. And again, I'll thank Professor Raghuram for taking this time and giving us the opportunity to get enlightened with this vision experience. Thank you very much.
As we embark on our journey, as we pay respect to our great navigator, H.A. Yasaswy sir, I would now like to invite Jagdish Patel sir to kindly come to the podium and talk about our great navigator.
In 1981, he started his consultancy firm, Yasaswy Management Associates Private Limited. Mr. Yasaswy served on the Board of Studies of Nagarjuna University from 1978 to 80. As a recognition of his finance expertise, Government of Andhra Pradesh appointed him as the chairman of Andhra Pradesh State Trading Corporation in 1985 to 88, and also as vice chairman of Public Enterprises Management Board in 1986 to 88. He was a visiting faculty at University of Management, Ahmedabad from 1986 to 88, and was nominated as a member on SEBI Committee on Accounting Standards. He was a member of the board of the directors of the Association of Certified Industrial International Investment Analysts, Switzerland. He authored many books on finance and investments. He was a change maker in true sense. Mr. Yasaswy chose to spend his full energy on the fledgling institution, and over the years, it grew to become a monument to what ambition can deliver. He was instrumental in building several business schools and about a dozen universities in the developing states of India, particularly in the Northeast region, so that the students of these areas can also have quality education to fulfill their dreams. He stood for professional management, excellence in quality of education, and absolute discipline effort in the ICFAI institutions. He was never tired of talking about ideas and their proper execution, delegating projects ably to people according to their strength, always positive and respectful, and open to monetize any idea that's unmined yet a most charismatic leader, a great motivator, a visionary, and a genius who lived years ahead of his time. His vision of maritime ethics, that is merit with ethics, has become a vision of ICFAI. ICFAI is committed to develop leaders capable of making decisions in complex business environment who are dedicated to serve their organization and society with their meaningful contribution. Today, some of the India's most successful fund managers, analysts, bankers, journalists, software and management professionals, thought leaders, and thinking elites have some vital connections with ICFAI. Either they worked at ICFAI or they studied at ICFAI and its associate wings. On this day of 8th memorial lecture in his memory, we all ICFAIans rededicate ourselves to fulfill his mission of creating a cadre of professionals who have acquired a high sense of moral and social responsibility that their future positions of leadership demands from them. His spirit will guide us forever.
Introduces themes of learning, along with a broad spectrum, keeps alive questions, inquisitiveness, and quest of knowledge among the young minds. And through the very same, we have with us Professor Raghuram. However, I would now like to invite Professor Naresh Sharma to introduce the speaker of the day.
Very good morning, everyone. In the academic world, the purpose of any academician, it is based on three pillars. The purpose like teaching, research, and service. But very few academicians are like they're able to excel in any of one of the purposes. But today, the guest we have among us, he not only excel in teaching, services, and research, but still he is continuing to provide his intellectual services to develop the nation. I'm privileged to introduce today's esteemed guest, Professor Raghuram sir. He is a visiting faculty of the National Rail and Transportation Institute of the Ministry of Railways. He is a professor emeritus at the Gujarat Maritime University. He has been director at IIM Bangalore from February 2017 to July 2020. Prior to that, he was professor and chairperson of the Public System Group of IIM Ahmedabad. He has been dean faculty IIM Ahmedabad, vice chancellor of the Indian Maritime University, and Indian Railways chairperson at IIM. He experts in infrastructure and transport systems and logistics and supply chain management. He conducts research on the railway, port, shipping, aviation, and road sectors. He has been and continues to be part of various government and institution policy making and advisory committees and of company boards. Raghuram sir has a BTech from IT Madras and postgraduate program Diploma in Management from IIM Ahmedabad and a PhD from Northwestern University. So we all are honored to have you sir for today's session. Now I request our esteemed guest to kindly address the crowd and enlighten them. Everyone.
Hi to everybody on the dais and here. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, so, well, it's really an honor for me to be invited for this Yasaswy Memorial Lecture. In fact, I noticed that I shared from the history, at least, in fact, from the remaining 7, I think the previous 5 have a strong connect with IIM Ahmedabad. Starting with Mallika Sarabhai, of course, she was a student at IIM Ahmedabad, a few years senior to me. I myself am a student from IIM Ahmedabad, 76, 78. And then the remaining were all my colleagues, faculty colleagues, Professor T.V. Rao, Professor Ravi Chandran, Professor Dheeraj Sharma, and Professor Rangarajan. So, Professor Rangarajan, of course, after being faculty at IIM-Ahmedabad, went on to hold much more stellar roles and continues to be post into his 90s. I mean, recently he released a book at Ahmedabad University. So anyway, so I'm quite honored and humbled that I've got this, this context to talk to you all. Let me just first begin with my own personal reflections with our family patriarch, N.J. Yasaswy. Well, interestingly, I first met him when I was doing my PhD at Northwestern University in Chicago. So after my studies at Ahmedabad, I decided that I'd like to be an academic, a management academic, and then the advice was, why don't you go abroad, get a PhD and come. So I went to Northwestern, very, quite a well-rated school and very rigorous for its education. 1979 I had gone there, and 1980 actually Mr. Yasaswy was to join Northwestern University in the finance department. I was in the economics and decision sciences department, as they called it. Of course, the first, so we had a common friend. My first interaction with him, really the stamp of brightness, and somebody who, had a very good understanding of issues in management, in finance. So we got talking, and he was there actually for a couple of, maybe a month. But I think he soon realized that the very sort of, shall I say, narrow focused PhD program that Northwestern had may not suit the way he's looking at his own contributions. And so he decided that he's moving on. So anyway, that was a brief interaction we had at Northwestern University, which is in a suburb of Chicago called Evanston. So of course then I think, through common people, and in fact, one of my good friends in the finance area, Akela Srinivas Rao, he and Yasaswy Garu were very close. And he used to tell me about what he's doing, and then I think the fact that he set up the Chartered Financial Analysts of India, the institute. I mean, chartered accountancy was known, cost and works accountants, ICFAI, all this. But to say that here is another profession evolving will be important, and we need a certain rigor, a certain code around which we must perform, was quite visionary, and to actually get to doing it. So that's how the ICFAI got founded in 1984. I'm sure all of you are far more aware of the details of that. I came back to India in 1985 after my PhD, and then he used to keep coming to IIM Ahmedabad. I sort of met him, I may not remember the exact dates of, I just heard that he was a visiting faculty in 87, around that, so maybe, because I joined IIM Ahmedabad in 1985, but I know he was a periodic visitor, and we would, share notes at around, that time. So, the passion with which he would speak, his vision of building a modern India by creating professional cadres, contemporary management education. Though extremely bright, new IAMs, but yet felt that we need many more numbers of people who are tuned into management education and making it more contemporary with supporting curriculum. And the reason I say that is, I think the idea that the case method is an important wave, an important pedagogy for management schools, but the way cases get written at IIM-Ahmedabad and at other institutions, in some ways these cases are far more detailed and may or may not actually serve a fitted purpose of, say, one session in class. Because cases are written, of course, with different objectives. I myself I have written many cases at IIM-Ahmedabad, and I've spent a lot of my time actually writing cases. But I think the way that the cases at ICFAI Business School are around, for ICFAI Business School have evolved in a different way. So of course the ICFAI Business School was set up, and talking of abbreviations, this is ICFAI is an abbreviation, and then we have ICFAI Business School, which is IBS, founded in 1996, and now we have 11 universities. I mean, see his vision. And then you have one more interesting, the IBS Center for Management Research, which is the one that, so I guess that is still quite active. ICMR is the one where the case writing and the publication. So I call it as functional teaching cases. Even the whole concept of a short case, maybe 2 pages, 3 pages, try to get to the issue. So I think his whole vision of how to bring in management education, to spread management education, was quite unique, and obviously paying a lot of dividends, satisfying a very important need in the country, indeed a visionary institution builder. Well, that's really how I have seen Mr. Yasaswy. Okay, so the topic I chose is infrastructure development in India, trends in PPPs. We all know what's a PPP?
Public-private partnership.
Public-private partnership, right. So that's been a large part of my time in terms of research, teaching, has really gone around this, right from late 80s or ever since I came back to India, and more so in the domain of transport infrastructure, though I have examined telecom and power and sewerage and water supply, more to look at common issues. So within infrastructure development, public-private partnerships is a very important format by which we try to develop infrastructure in the country. So what are the trends in PPPs is the... So I just thought, let's first, in the true case study method, let's just look at current context, what is happening, and from the context, maybe we can pull out some principles, some concepts. So, case method is context to concept. So, just a sample of, what's happening. So, beyond the airports that are already in the PPP, right? I hope you know which airports are already under public-private partnership. Anybody? Ahmedabad, absolutely. Though that was not the first. Mumbai and Delhi at the same time were given to 2 different parties. And then of course Bangalore, Hyderabad, which all happened around the same time. Cochin, and then second round there were many more. Of course, new airports. Anybody can name a new airport which is under PPP. See, Ahmedabad was an existing airport given to a private party. By the way, which private party is handling Ahmedabad? Adani. Okay. Which is the new airport? Cochin. Yeah, okay. I mean, Cochin was a new. So new. The term we use is greenfield and brownfield. Brownfield is existing any existing infrastructure. If we are doing something about it, that is brownfield. Greenfield is when it is new. So I'm asking something that is current. Greenfield. Noida, Jewar Airport. Yeah. Who's developing it? Who's the private party there? Well, it's one of the first airports after 100% FDI. FDI? Foreign direct investment was opened up. So, you know, when we talk of trends, so FDI opening up is another important trend in sourcing funds. So, the Jewar Airport, it is near Noida. So that's going to be the second big airport serving the national capital region. Zurich Airport. Zurich, which country? Switzerland. So Zurich Airport is the promoter there. Similarly, Mumbai also there is a second airport. Navi Mumbai. And who's developing that? Adani. Okay, fine. So airports. Now Ganga Expressway. Okay, December 2021. It's a greenfield expressway from Meerut to Prayagraj. They were broken up into four packages. 3 of those packages were won by on a PPP basis, actually by Adani. You could have just made a guess. Anyway, okay. And one of them is, I forget, one other company. So anyway, well, another interesting news item connected with transport infrastructure is the National Logistics Policy unveiled September 17, 2022. What is special about the date, September 17th?
Birthday of Narendra Modi, sir.
Birthday of Narendra Modi. Okay. Fine. Okay. DFCCIL, Dedicated Freight Corridor Corporation of India Limited, right? So this is another major infrastructure project. Of course, it is not being done on PPP basis, though there is private involvement. Okay, so most of the contractors, significant sort of private involvement. But just to give you an idea that not always everything is hunky-dory when we are doing infrastructure. In November actually, Tata Projects, there was a tension and some issues of delay and whatever, and DFCCIL said we're closing the contract and we're going for rebid, but within 1 week they tried to sort out the matter, sometimes giving a chatka. And then Tata Projects got reinstated. Here's another one where the problem persists. So in Delhi Metro, there was one line which was under, the airport line was under a PPP. And for a variety of reasons that even Delhi Metro could not fulfill, that PPP didn't work out. And Reliance, which was the private promoter, then pulled out. They claimed compensation because they had already invested a lot of money. But Delhi Metro was saying you didn't complete your job. You are supposed to run it like a PPP, but you have not been doing it. So it went to court, first it went to arbitration, then court. Courts ruled that actually because Delhi Metro did not fulfill certain requirements, technological requirements, that Reliance had trouble. So they said Delhi Metro has to pay them compensation. But to pay compensation, again they had to go to court. And anyway, the last chunk of 5,000 crores, which is a significant amount of course, is still to be paid. And Supreme Court has, said, now this is it, you please just pay up the money to Reliance. Anyway, Vande Bharat Express, right, just last week, Secunderabad, Visakhapatnam, now anytime the next one is coming, Mumbai to Solapur. In fact, along with that, PM Modi is in Mumbai. I think he is inaugurating a couple of stretches of the metro. And then I saw in today's paper a huge center page fold about the Mumbai-Nagpur Expressway. Yeah, so there is a lot of infrastructure. Whether there are problems, there are some of them do run into problems, but fact is there is a significant amount of infrastructure that is being developed, and I would attribute a lot to the current government, which is so in fact what they have is not only to develop infrastructure, but they also have a concept called national monetization pipeline, where existing infrastructure can be handed over to private parties to improve and get value out of. So roads or power transmission, power generation, in other words, handing over existing thermal power plants. Airports, handing over existing airports. Ports, telecom towers, optical fiber cables, railway stations. There is a huge amount of activity going on in railway stations in terms of trying to either some greenfield development or existing railway stations, improving it. I think the number 100, in fact, every other day some railway station or the other, what are its plans, how it is going to be developed. Railway track, then natural gas pipeline, petroleum and products pipeline, warehouses, sports stadium. So all this is sort of coming under a national monetization pipeline. The idea is that 6 trillion rupees or 6 lakh crores of monetization is expected to happen by the year 24-25. This is also co-terminus with another major sort of package called the National Infrastructure Pipeline, where 100 trillion rupees are expected to be invested in. And to give you an idea that under the National Monetization Pipeline, in the first year, the target was 88,000 crores. They have already achieved 96,000 crores. Okay, the 21-22 year. 22-23 is still going on. So out of 6 trillion, 96,000 is just short of 1 trillion. Okay, so that I think if it keeps pace, we will be seeing that this is actually going to be done by 2025. The National Infrastructure Pipeline, 100 trillion, is spread over itself. There are, I have the National Infrastructure Pipeline, but I have various programs, if you will, that is set of projects. So like Bharatmala, in roads, or Sagarmala in ports, National Rail Plan, that's in railways, BharatNet, the optical fiber, power distribution, urban, rural, agri infrastructure, water, Jal Jeevan Mission, housing for all. So these are the areas where the 100 trillion is to be spent. So how is that 100 trillion, to see whether it is happening in keeping pace? In 22-23, out of a total budget of 40 trillion. So see, these are programs running, the plan is 5 years or that kind of a framework. But then every year we have the annual budget, in which finally you have to say this year I'm going to spend so much money. So 22-23, 40 trillion was our national budget, out of which infrastructure accounted for 7.5 trillion. So you can see, of course, the national infrastructure pipeline in 5 years it is supposed to be 100 trillion. 22-23 we have spent 7.5 trillion. But the idea is that year after year it will step up. Obviously it has to step up beyond 20 trillion, because if I take 100 trillion over 5 years, we should be doing 20 trillion every year. So in that sense we are under investing as per our own plan. Anyway, this year we are expecting about 10 trillion. This is on February 1st. We can wait and watch what's happening on February 1st.
Budget presented by the finance minister.
So the overall infrastructure allocation is expected to be 10 trillion. So how quickly we will hit 100 trillion, remains to be seen. Of course, the bigger issue is, where is our bandwidth? Even if the money is available, GST collections are going up, there is greater tax compliance in petroleum, because even if the crude oil prices go down, government is not reducing the fuel rate, so there is more surplus being generated. So funds are not an issue. Issue is, do we have the bandwidth to spend it appropriately? So challenges are construction management, maybe land acquisition, managerial manpower who will join infrastructure companies and enable good management of these kind of projects, and not only the building of the project but also the operations. Okay, so that's a big challenge area. So anyway, I think we have a sense of some of the big numbers. The main takeaway is that infrastructure is a very, very happening domain in the country. In fact, we were just discussing that globally they are talking of recession, right? The news is not good, especially in IT and platform related organizations, Amazon and Microsoft, and they're all laying off people. But in infrastructure that cannot happen in India, because the investments and the money, the project concepts and the money is available. Question may be whether the appropriate human resources and the other enabling ecosystem, to what extent those can be put in place. And for a country like India, infrastructure is a must, because we are in many ways so constrained in our infrastructure that if we just have more infrastructure, our economy will get unshackled, unlocked. And I think that is the potential. Okay, so that's the basic background or understanding of what's happening in infrastructure. Let's just see certain concepts. So first of all, what the word infrastructure means is, in a very simple 3 words rather, the definition of infrastructure is social overhead capital. So what we mean by social overhead capital is, so first of all, it is what we look at a societal level, rather than, see, most of us would have studied at a corporate level. We study about organizations. Whereas infrastructure is something that affects an entire economy, an entire society. Then infrastructure is like an overhead. So in the corporate also we have overheads. What's an overhead? What is an overhead cost in a corporate context? How would you, in principle, what would be the driving principle of an overhead? We have all studied overheads, right? Yes.
Sort of a fixed cost or an installation cost?
Sort of a fixed cost or
Installation cost.
his
Installation cost. Installing the machine.
installation cost. Okay. Could be, it could also be variable. In general, it may be a fixed cost. I go with you on that, but it could also be a variable cost. The driving principle is not quite what you said. Yeah.
Applicable to whole organization and at the similar level.
Okay. Let me just build on it. I think that's pretty close. It is non-attributable to output, to revenue streams. So as an entity, here I am an organization and I have different outputs, and output gets me revenue. Now I have a certain cost. I cannot say this cost is only for this output or for that output. So something that is common. So costs of, the top management in an organization. In any organization, the costs of the leadership, because they are taking decisions on various outputs. So that is actually an overhead. That's why it is over the head. So we say overhead. There are many other things which are overheads. I mean, if I'm say in a campus environment, the estate costs, security costs, these are all overheads. Because I cannot say that that is meant for this particular program, or it is meant for this particular consulting assignment, or it is, wherever revenues are coming. And third is capital. Generally, it draws a significant amount of capital. So, because earlier you said fixed cost or installation cost. Okay, so installation cost is more like capital. I'm investing for a long time. The value of that is available to me for a long time. Okay, so infrastructure, if we just use this principle, social overhead capital, it will bring out many aspects about infrastructure, and also why infrastructure as an economic activity is different from maybe any other normal business economic activity. Because in a normal business economic activity, you may have a lot of costs which are attributable. You may have a lot of costs which are ongoing. Whereas infrastructure, overhead and capital. Okay. And secondly, social, we are saying it is applicable for a whole society, not just a particular organization. So, a good example is, say, roads. A road, I cannot say, road is capital intensive, I have to make the road. It is meant for the whole society, and it's an overhead, because I cannot say whether it is specific for cement movement, or specific for passenger movement, or specific for private vehicles or public vehicles, or it's available to all forms of economic output. Okay, so that's what makes it a overhead. So you can immediately see the challenges, because see, if you have an attributable cost, I can then do the pricing of that output, keeping in view this cost. But if I have a non-attributable cost and I have a particular outcome, how do I price it? How much of that should help in covering the overhead? If I don't cover the overhead, I cannot be viable overall. So this is an important challenge. Pricing immediately becomes a challenge. Access, to whom all will you give access? because it is social. Ideally, you must give access to everybody. Not only say the rich or those who gain lot of value from it, but maybe there are others who need access to it, without which they will have, they would face problems in their life. So equity principles may come in. So there are challenges that start coming in infrastructure as opposed to any other product where, so in economics we use the concept called, can you exclude? Can I create a product and exclude only those who pay to use it and those who don't pay cannot use it? In general, in infrastructure, by its very definition, you can't do that. And that creates challenges. Okay, so there are many such challenges and so infrastructure, why this non-exclusion and all, the infrastructure is so fundamental. It supports economic growth, it supports poverty alleviation, and it has to be done in such a way that we have a sustainable natural environment, because in general, infrastructure takes a lot of natural resources. Now, of course, the Department of Economic Affairs under the Ministry of Finance has given more a practical, what is infrastructure, instead of getting into attributes and concepts. They have said this is in transport and logistics is infrastructure, energy, water and sanitation, communication, and social and commercial infrastructure. So all this is what right now is defined as infrastructure by the government. So just as an outcome of what we defined, there are sort of 3 points we need to keep in mind. So one is that infrastructure, high investment costs and decreasing average cost. That means, so like to make a road, I have to invest a lot of money. And I need to make a road even for one vehicle to use the road. So the cost per unit of one vehicle as an output will be, crores of rupees, because I have to make the road. But for the second vehicle, the cost per vehicle will immediately come down by half, because now it is spread over 2 vehicles, and 3 vehicles, and 500 vehicles, and 1,000 vehicles, and 10,000 vehicles. So the more usage there is a decreasing average cost. Now what this does, those of you, from understanding economies of scale, so this has an intrinsic scale economy. So the more that one organization does, in general, the costs will come down. And that is why traditionally in infrastructure, one entity used to manage large levels of infrastructure. For example, can you name organizations in India which are in the infrastructure business that manage large volume of infrastructure? Okay, you are getting into private, that's fine. Actually, private came in later. So L&T, Adani, Reliance, definitely Tata's. Take Indian Railways as an example, right? Single entity. At one time, telecom. In fact, there was no BSNL also. It used to be the Department of Telecom. So traditionally, because of the decreasing average cost, it was felt that one entity managing the whole business is better. That is called natural monopoly. Because naturally it makes sense to have a monopoly. But if you have a natural monopolist, monopoly in general is not a good idea for a business domain. So either you need to have regulation to sort of control the behavior of the monopolist, or the simple solution was let government do it. The idea being that at least in a democratic country, government is at some point accountable to the public. That is how in countries like India or even US for that matter or Singapore, you will find that a lot of infrastructure is actually managed by government. Indian Railways, Department of Telecom. It's a different matter that over a period of time private parties have started coming in, which is what we will explore. But okay, so this is one important principle, that because of this decrease, the social overhead capital, decreasing average cost, natural monopoly, and therefore government. Another reason why often government is involved is most infrastructure uses very key resources. So if it is a port, coastline, if it is telecom, spectrum, road, land, railways, land, sometimes maybe forest area. So it's a tricky business. Whether that land, an ecologically sensitive land, to be used for development purposes versus to be retained as is, it's a tough call. And it was often felt that if a private party has to develop, they may be more commercially driven, whereas if it is government, they will have a better balance. So that's another reason why government was often the developer of infrastructure. And there's a third reason, and that is, in most infrastructure, the benefits are not only enjoyed by the direct user, the externalities are high. That's another important principle in infrastructure. So if I use the metro, not only I as a user, I gain, I reach in quicker time, I reach more comfortably, I don't have to go through the road pollution or whatever reasons for having a metro. Also, the retail outlets near the stations, the office complexes, they are getting value because traffic can easily come to them. So whenever I put a transport corridor, the value goes up. In fact, if you go and see that spread of Times of India today, you will see that how for that entire stretch, they are actually saying different pockets, what kind of development the Maharashtra government is planning to leverage the fact that there is an expressway that's coming in. So these we call as externalities. Because I have externalities, again it makes sense for government to do infrastructure, because the value of those externalities in general through tax and other sources of income will come back to government. Okay, so these three principles, decreasing high investment cost, decreasing average cost, use of a key national resource, and benefits from costs from users to non-users, that is benefits and costs. Costs also. I may have a polluting infrastructure. Then again, there are other people who are suffering because of that. So the presence of externalities, all the three in a sense point at government trying to do infrastructure unless you have good regulation. But then, in countries like India and even in the US, which did some infrastructure was under government and some infrastructure has been in private. The entire railway system in the US has developed in private hands, and for a good reason. They said, suppose government has to do it. Government's ability to have efficient asset creation or efficient asset maintenance and very efficient service using the infrastructure is not quite up to the mark, because government gets faced with many other concerns. So there is a term called incentive compatibility. Basically what we are saying is, are people who are involved in government, do they have the incentive to perform to their best as the infrastructure requires? It's often not the case, because you have people who are, a very simple thing, at the highest level of any of these government entities is usually a civil servant. And a civil servant rarely stays for the duration of developing a project, because the civil servant's mobility is controlled by so many other considerations. Whereas if a Reliance is putting up an infrastructure or a factory, normally a person who is a project head would remain until the project is complete. So, this is just one example. There are other examples of how do you do the procurement, tendering process. You have to go through this L1 tendering, the lowest cost, whereas maybe in Reliance they may have multiple considerations and many times quick decisions are possible. But in a public sector that's not possible. So asset creation, asset maintenance, service delivery, all of these get diluted, partly because the stakeholding, the accountability, the autonomy are not as to the level to which they need to be. And this is where we say the incentive compatibility, that the incentive compatibility is not appropriate. Even though we said earlier that there are elements why it points at that government should be doing it, unless you have a regulator. If you have a regulator, then you can bring anybody else to do it, because the regulator will keep a watch. But if government has to do it, we have possibilities that the asset creation, asset maintenance, service delivery may not be as it ideally should be. And that's precisely an important issue that India has suffered from. So it took us, I think, quite a bit into the 90s until liberalization happened, where this came to a major debate saying our infrastructure is now way behind the need for economic growth. And most of the infrastructure is, if I can use the term, is stuck with government trying to develop it. So we said, look, I have to get this and get other people involved. And that's where public-private partnerships comes in. So if you want more stakeholding, you can bring in privatization. We use terms like appropriate bundling. That means you have to bundle the set of activities appropriately. Accountability, you have to bring in accountability, maybe more competition. You can't just say Indian Railways alone will run trains. Who are they competing with? There's no competition. So how do you make sure that they are doing the best? Whereas in airports today, there is a GMR, there is Adani, there is of course government through Airports Authority of India. So there is a lot of comparison and similarly economy. Can I quickly take a decision? Because I see it as important and I want to ask this contractor to come and solve this problem. In government, you have to go through tendering process, because you're saying public funds and there is a procedure to follow. So it is these reasons why we have brought in public-private partnerships. By bringing in public-private partnerships, we talk about 8 pillars, and all these are new areas of how looking at an economic activity has evolved in the last 20 years. So project structuring. Project structuring is, what constitutes a project. Risks, the whole idea of risk identification, assessment, management, financial appraisal and sourcing, tendering and bidding processes, concession and contractual agreements, project management, and post-project activities, and dispute resolution. I already gave you examples of, the Delhi Metro dispute or Tata projects versus dedicated freight corridor. So all these are definitely going to arise. And today there is a lot of work that has gone into all of this. And that is why today infrastructure, not only one course, one can even the multiple, each one of these topics is worth multiple sessions to get into the detail and, and to build up a whole understanding of infrastructure development. Anyway, I'm just going to, in terms of trends, just pick up two important areas. One is project structuring and the other is concession and contractual agreements. So the most important thing is when you bring in a public-private partnership, and we said why we want to do it, because incentive compatibility in government is lacking. Whereas you bring a private party, there is greater stakeholding, greater accountability, greater autonomy. But when you bring a private party, we have to make sure that the risks of doing the project are properly allocated. You can't make it too risky for them. Then at some point, like in Delhi Metro, that's what happened. There was a lot of technological dependence on DMRC for Reliance to do that airport line. The risk was not properly balanced, and somewhere DMRC could not live up to that technology, that technological requirement, and Reliance then was facing the trouble. So, how to allocate risks properly?
But yes, there are so many takes we can take from it. I'll just repeat few of them because somewhere in some time, when I was teaching one of the subject of project finance, and we have a case study from our ICMR, which is talk about Hyderabad Airport, and it was that time at least 8 years old case study, and when you visit, we can see what is written in case study and what is the outcome. And probably just before COVID, when we visited Hyderabad Airport, it was another expansion. So whatever written in case study was already over, there would be at least another 2 phases are already out, and we can see those things in reality. And I'm sure what Shree has mentioned, many projects, maybe some of you have already visited or used those infrastructure in your real life. Now you can, whenever you visit, probably you'll further see what is happening in that project, and probably you can connect what Shree has shared today. So we are deeply grateful to you, sir, on the sharing of knowledge, what you have delivered here. I'm sure you started with recent happenings in terms of lots and lots of projects which are going on. The second part was most interesting, where you say that definition of infrastructure, which I say SOC, social overhead capital. And I'm sure everyone will remember the way to defining that infrastructure than your other definitions that, right? So you remember that SOC, social overhead capital, which each word has its own takers on that. Of course, then there are characteristics on that, 3 characteristics. The framework of commercialization, where you are talking about the asset creation, asset maintenance, and the service delivery, which further leads to stakeholders and other part, and which leads to the public-private partnership, or it could be a public-public partnership, what we have mentioned in one of the slides, let's say. And of course, last not but least, those 8 pillars or principles what we have shared. I believe 2 of them what you have discussed in deeply that, but yes, risk I recall, because everywhere, yes, there is a trade-off and risk. I'm sure there are ways to mitigate those risks, and that is what you have shared in some of the question and answer. And I'm happy that students have asked many questions. Still, there are many questions with it, and I'm sure students will work upon those slides where you have put 4 broader questions. And I'm sure there could be a submission from students to write down your thoughts on those areas. We'll be happy to understand what one understanding you have taken from this session, what sir has explained from simple to complex way, and at the same time, what other research you can do and can find out or can give us to us that. So with that, sir, we are really thankful and grateful to you on this occasion, where I'm sure can connect many of the whatever founder has done in terms of academics delivery. He was stalwart in finance and accounting area. I'm sure the same goes with you, with your understanding of PPPs and the decades of your experience and what you have shared there. With this, I take this opportunity and this platform to thanks Vivek sir, because the way Shree Yasaswy sir has created legacy in education, when people don't think about private education, sir has continued that legacy to invite a very diverse dignitaries here. I think sir has given few names like Dr. T.V. Rao, Dr. N. Ravichandran, last year we have C. Rangarajan, and today we have G. Raghuram sir. Thank you so much sir for being here, sharing your thoughts and principles on this occasion. Not the least, but yes, we are also thankful to our friends and well-wishers, our students, alumni, our industry and media partners, and of course the IBS family, staff, administration, and of course the student committee who have done lots of work behind the screen. Right? We appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much, and once again, thank you so much, sir, for being here with us.
Now I would request Jagdish sir to kindly present our mentor as a token of thanks to our esteemed guest. On this note, we mark the end of the session today. However, I would request you all to kindly rise for the national anthem. Would request all to kindly proceed down.